Joe Cross is a man of action. He's busy making sure folks have access to groceries, taking care of the local unhoused, tormenting his political enemies, keeping his fragile wife afloat, and maintaining the peace in his small town of Eddington, New Mexico. The man is being torn in a million directions. No wonder he's losing his mind. It's important to note that Eddington is a comedic satire, which is to say, it's quite politically trolly, and if you can't handle, for example, Team America World Police, this film is perhaps not for you. Anyway, content warning about politics or whatever. So Joe, he's presented as a generally good guy. His wife is clearly suffering from some unspeakable trauma, and he's extraordinarily kind and patient with her. He even has a friend of a friend by her, shall we say, interesting dolls. Joe puts up with Bunny's narcissist mom, a direct continuation from the mother in Beau is Afraid, who constantly has the online conspiracy version of a 24-hour cable news network rambling on in the background. When an older gentleman gets kicked out of the store because he can't breathe in a mask, Joe buys his groceries. He makes a big old stink about masking and bullies his way through the situation, but also, refusing a man food for not masking seems a little harsh, especially when there's been 0 confirmed cases in town. Not that this would have actually happened in small town New Mexico.
Mean to me and my disabled family.
A New Mexico man recorded the moments his family of 4 was kicked out of the Hobby Lobby off Montgomery.
Oh, well, in all fairness, I didn't do that much research. Also, this is Albuquerque, which technically qualifies as a big shitty. Also, it's not a grocery store. Personally, I never encountered this situation during the height of the pandemic. People walked around without masks pre-vaccine, and plenty of people, including myself, walked around with cloth masks or scarves or whatever, which, as we all know now, did absolutely nothing to prevent the spread of an airborne virus. Methinks the performative nature of wearing some sort of mask was more important than any real-world efficacious mask usage. But what about the right's insistence on the individualistic approach to the pandemic? That view was not unique to the US. Here is a Reddit post from a Swiss person who feels ostracized in the present day for wearing a mask to protect his preemie baby. And here is a random study I found to back it up. East Asia has a culture of masking. North America and Europe do not. This whole situation was always going to be contentious. And let's be real, across the political spectrum, we all visited friends, we all shared spaces, we all didn't follow the rules to the letter. Everyone made judgments about their proximity to others based off of their own sense of safety, risk, and need to work. Point is, Joe is making sure people are eating during a crisis. He is also the only person who interacts with Lodge, the homeless man. The idealistic, mostly white children who are fighting for the rights of black people very loudly outright ignore the man when he enters their space. And Ted Garcia, the mayor of Edington, calls Sheriff Joe to take the problem off his hands. They bicker about who should take responsibility for the man, as neither party is willing or able to offer Lodge a long-term solution. In the US, and I assume most places the world over, this sort of thing gets resolved by law enforcement, who are generally ill-equipped to deal with the homeless population because there's no actual solution to their problem in the current state of affairs. They just get churned through the system over and over again. Arguably, even though he's incredibly misguided, Joe does keep an eye on and an eye out for Lodge. Mr. Garcia, however, keeps passing the buck off to someone else. And then there's Louise, Joe's house-ridden wife who has some sexual trauma that she expresses through her doll art. She hides her obsession with Vernon Jefferson Peake, a guru who targets vulnerable people like Louise. Joe is very supportive of Bunny. He takes interest in her art and asks about her day. When she asks about his day, he minimizes his rougher spots, trying not to upset her. They've also been married for a while, but have never had sex. He asks about it, but doesn't pressure her.
No. Oh, I'm sorry. No. Hey, you don't apologize.
They do fight about when to kick her mom out of the house, which is understandable, but overall, Joe is a decent and loving partner. It is also worth noting that Joe doesn't politicize Michael's blackness, unlike every other character on screen. They bond over AR target practice, and the fact that Mikey's dad was actually Joe's captain back when he was a deputy. When Joe promotes Mike to sergeant after the Black Lives Matter movement breaks out across the country, he inquires,
And, Sheriff, this ain't 'cause of the news.
What news?
Not saying that Joe cares deeply about the suffering of black people, or really anyone outside the purview of his own family, but he does just treat Michael like a person. Something that I am currently failing at by analyzing the politicization of his skin color. We'll get there.
It's bad. It's an awful tragedy, okay? It's bad. But it's a bad apple that's across the country, okay? Let's just let our kids blow off some steam. Michael, are you okay?
Yeah.
Suffice it to say, you may or may not agree with Sheriff Joe's politics, but he's doing the best he can with the resources he has available. He's not perfect, but then who is? And then he freaks out, gets radicalized, and kills a bunch of people. There's a lot of radicalization in this film, primarily Joe, Michael, Bunny, and this little twerp, although he's more of an opportunistic grifter than someone who actually cares about anything.
It was hard to do what I had to do, but I had to do what I had to do, which we all have to do when it's our time to do it.
The goal is to be white abolitionists, and that means actually
changing institutions, dismantling whiteness, and not allowing whiteness to reassert itself.
It's hard to say what moment Joe completely loses the plot. It's more of a slow unraveling than a singular moment that changes him, although there is a very clear point of no return. Bunny leaves him for the guru, and he faces a harrowing humiliation at Ted's hand, which, I don't know, who's the better ragdoll, Joaquin Phoenix or Paul Dano? With Paul, the ragdolling in There Will Be Blood is the best thing ever, but Joaquin does it way more often, and they're all high-quality bits. Personally, I feel very conflicted on the subject. Anyway, after his wife leaves him and he is publicly humiliated by his political rival, Joe Cross begins his descent into murdering and whatnot. But the seeds of his radicalization were really sown after he helped the old man with his groceries. Sheriff Joe gets some praise for his actions online, and then decides to livestream a rant about masking before stumbling into an announcement about his candidacy for mayor. I mean, when I'm feeling out of control, I also like to run for political office. This is where he starts valuing his selfish desires above everyone else. With Louise, he doesn't consult her about his candidacy. She's a very private person. Running for office would put them in the spotlight. And so, in retaliation, she brings the guru back to their home, where the subject turns to childhood sexual abuse. Vernon explains that, as a kid, he was taken to a private forest grove and passed around by his father's colleagues. When Louise starts talking about the helpless children and these cabals, her mother gets all upset and defensive. She outright abandons the conversation. Later that night in bed, Joe tries to ask Louise if her dad ever did anything to her, suggesting that Bunny's never been comfortable enough with her husband to openly talk about her trauma. And it's not that Joe doesn't care about his wife and wouldn't try to be there for her in an emotional capacity. It's that she doesn't feel like she would be believed about her experiences, likely because her other close family member, her mother, has been gaslighting her about this shit since forever. At the end of the movie, Joe suffers a head wound and becomes paralyzed. He lives in the mayor's mansion with his mother-in-law and the home health care worker. They all sleep in the same bed together, suggesting that Louise also had that experience and was sexually abused by her dad and or her mother's other sexual partners. The film implies that, back in the day, Louise said something to some sort of authority figure that tipped them off to the abuse, and so, in order to obfuscate the harm that she was doing to her daughter, Louise's mom blamed everything on Ted Garcia. Nothing ever officially happened or whatever, but Joe's sizable hatred of Teddy stems from that version of events. And so, without the consent of his wife, Joe publicly shares this story for his own political gain. This, of course, backfires tremendously. Louise denies the story and ditches him for Vernon, and then Joe gets bitch-slapped by Ted, and then later the home health care worker. I may need to walk back the thing I said about Joe being a good husband. Louise opens up to the guru because he claims to have had similar experiences to hers, and so she views him as someone who is more likely to listen to and believe her. She misses all of his other red flags because her trauma is so deeply embedded, and he's the only person who could help her out of it. Later, when his cult becomes popular enough for TV, Louise is shown to be smiling and pregnant, implying that she's at least comfortable enough with Vernon to have sex with him, unlike Joe. Out of one trauma and into another, I always say.
That one must be new.
Oh, it's been there for a month.
God is speaking through you.
So back to our favorite sheriff. Brev gets bitch-slapped and then goes on a murdering spree. He first kills the homeless man because, frankly, Joe is tired of dealing with him. My argument about Joe being better than the other characters for at least interacting with Lodge seems to have gone completely out the window. He then moves on to Teddy and his son Eric. Now the boy did nothing wrong, so that's bad. It is Ari Aster though, so I'm assuming it's a sins of the father thing, his films being parables and whatnot, a la Darren Aronofsky. But Teddy, motherfucker conspires to bring a data center to town, despite the harms to the water supply and the people it brings. He claims that it will improve the local infrastructure and economy, neither of which happens. Having committed 3 murders, he moves things around and messes with the crime scenes. At the mayor's house, he comes up against the Pueblo authorities, who have jurisdiction over the back of the house, while Joe, as the sheriff of Sevilla County, has jurisdiction over the front of the house. Yada yada yada, etc. He then pins the Garcia murders on Michael because some white bitch was trying to make him jealous by taking a slightly suggestive photo with Eric and... Let's back up. Eric is Ted Garcia's son. They have a contentious relationship, primarily because Ted is doing all the masking COVID safety stuff in a performative fashion and getting all butthurt that Eric, while generally doing fairly safe outdoor hangs with his fellow kids, is showing Ted to be a political hypocrite. Also, his mother left for mysterious reasons. One assumes Ted is a pretty unbearable person to live with.
When my son and me woke up one morning to find that my wife, his mother, had abandoned us, without a note, without a word, we were devastated.
Eric's peer group includes the aforementioned white girl and little twerp. The kids in the story are mouthpieces for how a middle-aged person interpreted the youth internet discourse at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement. Honestly, it's pretty mean, but this film has a pretty mean portrayal of everybody, except maybe the Pueblo officer who seems loyal and protective of his community. Although, he does get killed because this is a cynical American parable and he's indigenous, so there's that. While Eric and his cohort are pondering the theoretical applications of morality and politics, Michael is busy working a real job. He's generally portrayed as apolitical, as in, he doesn't seem super invested in politics.
We can't go back, but we can, we can learn by our mistakes.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin. Use it to get county residents on the blockchain, too.
His loyalty is to his job and station. When his co-deputy Guy asks why the BLM protests, riots got bigger overnight, Mike doesn't have an answer for him because he's not as tuned into it as everyone else. Well, with the exception of Joe.
Oh no, my sons.
I love this shot of the sheriff's office coming to deal with the protest. Guy has riot gear, Joe has a selfie stick, and Mike is just wearing the uniform. The following scene really exemplifies why this is the comedy of the year.
You should be joining us. Do you even know why you aren't? I know I have not experienced racism, but you have. This is not my place. This is not my fight. I am a hypocrite. I know that, but all I can do is stand here and fight for justice.
There were only 4 people in the theater I was at, but man, did my laughter fill the air in this moment. This little girl just discovered that black people get treated slightly differently than white folk, and instead of dealing with it in her own time and space, she unloads on the first black person she sees, effectively making him perform the emotional labor to ease the burden of her white fragility. And watch these white children tell Michael off for being a racist for wearing a pig uniform. He and his ilk have been carrying out racial violence in this sleepy town, where, according to the film, there was once a black captain on the police force. Not saying there's not corruption in small-town America, not saying that black police officers haven't carried out atrocities on behalf of racist institutions, and I have no doubt that people like Uncle Ruckus exist. It is, however, the height of hubris for some white girl to lecture a black man about his station, as if he wasn't intelligent enough to make decisions for himself. Look, people, don't politicize your friends. Talk to them about your problems. Help them with theirs. Maybe their issues are a little different from yours because of race or gender or socioeconomic status or whatever. And that's okay. Just listen and be supportive. And if they're a good friend, they will in turn listen and support you. That's it. It's not complicated. Treat your friends like your friends. Whoa. Mind fucking blown. So yeah, Michael is getting politicized by people who claim to care about his life when his sheriff decides to set him up for the Garcia murders. Did I say that Joe treated Mike the best out of all the on-screen characters? Whoops. Despite palling around with Michael instead of Guy for most of the movie, Joe makes the motive for the murder seem politically charged and pins it to his favorite deputy, a young black man known to practice shooting with automatic rifles. A whole host of shenanigans occur during what is frankly a very long and indulgent sequence. Like every theatrical release from 2025, this movie really needed to lose 20 to 97 minutes of its runtime. So basically, these white nationalists, or white agitators, or white whatevers, they go around pretending to be left extremists and cause more chaos in small town New Mexico, including very conveniently surrounding a black man with explosives because he's a pig and therefore a racist scumbag. The explosives then go off, killing Guy and injuring Michael. Joe proceeds to run around, getting shot at by these pretenders before being stabbed in the head. Don't worry, he survives and is duly punished for his transgressions by having to spend the rest of his life under the care of his ex-wife's evil narcissist mother and be the mayor/figurehead of Eddington despite having zero power. And wouldn't you know, a year after all of this, the data center was successfully built, and it oh so righteously memorialized the fallen Pueblo officer who was definitely in favor of its existence. And Michael, now having been burned for being a black man, is fully radicalized and practices shooting with his AR. In all fairness, this was an activity he was doing before all the bullshit, so is the film actually trying to say that he was radicalized, or that he simply went back to his normal routine, now just a little worse for wear? The tone of this scene seems to suggest something, but the waters are pretty muddy on this one. So yeah, that's the movie. Just like American politics, it leaves one fairly empty and exhausted, so I'm gonna go take a nap. Bye.